Right. Good day, good morning, good evening, good afternoon to various people around the world, depending on the time zone. And good to have you all here. I'm Captain Gaurav Rana. I run C and Beyond, and we keep on doing certain webinars, master classes, essentially to upskill the industry, to give back to the industry, to know about what new is happening. And in this particular webinar, this master class, I had a word with Puneet sir a couple of months back, and I heard him, and that's when I thought, I mean, there's so much to offer, and I think it'll be a privilege if me or CN Beyond becomes that medium to offer the learnings which he has to share. That's there, but it's just that. I mean, if there was at all a time in the VUCA world wherein we had to know about geopolitics, I think it's now, and it's not just about I mean, in this masterclass, and also how Puneet presents it is, it's not just about knowing geopolitics, but it's also about how it affects the business, how it affects you as an individual as well. So that's very, very important, and that's the perspective which Puneet is going to give all of us. Let me just start by also checking the kind of audience we have. So I'll have a poll, and we'll have a few polls on during the webinar as well. So if I may know, what's your current position? So just to know, are you sailing? If you're sailed and settled ashore, you're working ashore without sailing, and no work experience essentially. So where's the audience like? And while we get a overview of the audience, let me introduce Puneet, and I think it'll be a long introduction, but I'll try and keep it a little short. He's been 30 years in commercial shipping, worked in Precious, Noble Group, Torvald Clavinus, and he runs Maritime NXT in Singapore, a platform which is dedicated to the next in maritime through training, teaching, mentoring. He's teaching geopolitics at 12 different colleges worldwide, and he's a senior adjunct fellow at MPA Academy, affiliated research fellow at Singapore Maritime University, visiting professor at WMU, Bayes Business School, Lanyon Technology, Lanyon's Business School, Copenhagen Business School, University of Piraeus, Indian Institute of Management, Shillong, lecturing on geopolitics, risk and their impact on supply chain and trade flows. And of course, he's involved in maritime tech startup and as an angel investor, and I'm sure as an advisor as well. He holds masters in shipping, trade, and finance from Bayes, previously CAS Business School UK, and LLB and postgraduate diploma in maritime law from University of London. He's also an expert witness and member of Baltic Expert Witness Association UK. So welcome to the masterclass, Puneet, and thanks for taking out time and sharing your insights on this topic. And before I hand over the platform, let me just take one more, or let me first just check on the poll which we had and share the results. So of the audience which we have, we've got almost 53% of the people who have sailed and settled ashore now, 25% who are working ashore but who do not have a sailing background, and about 18% with only sailing experience, and 5% with no work experience. And that's just in terms of professionally how the audience is, and in terms of how the audience, what's their views or understanding on geopolitics. Let me take that one poll as well. One second, a quick one. Okay. Here is poll on what is your level of understanding on geopolitics, and let's hear from you, and then over to you, Puneet, once we get.
Thanks. Hey.
A few more answers, please. We've got about 60% of you who have voted. I'll wait for another 7-8 seconds before I stop the poll. Let's make this a little bit more engaging, guys. So a few more answers, please, on the poll question. All right, I'm ending the poll and sharing the results. So most of the audience is like me, Puneet. We follow geopolitics, but we don't know how to make use of it in our practical life. The next bit is 21% who are actually deep into geopolitics, and then a few who are intrigued by it but don't know where to start. So that's the audience for you, Puneet, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Captain Gaurav. I'm very, very happy and thankful to be able to share this. Can I just request the ability to share my screen? So I'm just going to try and see if I can just do that. Yep. Right. So let me just try and bring it here. Great. So I'm very, very thankful to Captain Gaurav, C and Beyond, to allow me to share some of these perspectives. My introduction has been given by Captain Gaurav, but I would like to definitely correct a few things there. I've got Jeffrey sitting there. I'm sure he will tell me that a few things need to be corrected in that, and those things are essentially that. First of all, my entire presentation and all the discussions today are predominantly or will be in with regard to my work as the founder and director of Maritime NXT. All the other roles that I play are obviously complementary in most cases, but they are not related to this particular topic. As he said, Captain Gaurav said, I've got most of my experience in dry bulk shipping. But in the last few years in Klaveness, I was involved in heading their digital transformation. So I got involved in the technology space as well. I am an affiliated research fellow at SMU in Singapore. I'm a lecturer at Nanyang Technology University and Nanyang Business School. And then I'm a senior adjunct fellow at the MPA Academy. In the other cases of the other schools, except for IIM Shillong, where I'm a visiting professor, most of the other places I'm just doing guest lectures. So there's a difference between that. And I just wanted to clarify that. I also do some customized geostrategy workshops for some trading companies and maritime companies, which is like a 5 to 7 hours workshop. I try and customize it to their trade and their types of businesses and give them case studies from those trades so that they can relate to it. And those have been very successful for me because the more you interact with people in the profession, the more you learn yourself, which I'm sure I will do today as well. And as Captain Gaurav said, let's try and keep it interactive. Feel free to ask any questions that you have. And of course, I am the current president of the Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers. And of course, I'm also a member of the Baltic Expert Witness Association and also the representative for Singapore for the BIVA. So that is something which is very much a part of what I do. And the geopolitics part is very much front and center with regard to. So how do I go about doing this? When I teach in these 12 business schools around the world at various levels, from being a professor to a lecturer to maybe just a guest lecturer, how do I go about doing it? Where do I get my information from? A lot of the information that I've got comes from my personal experience and analysis. I interact with about 400 students around through the year, with a lot of professionals over the years as well. Secondly, and most importantly, I actually look at data all the time. I'm reading, like today, for example, the Israel-Iran conflict. There is already data that I'm trying to sift through about where can the oil flow away from the Straits of Hormuz, because Straits of Hormuz is now looking very dicey in terms of transiting. So where can these pipelines flow? Unfortunately, they all flow into Red Sea, and that means that the Houthis come into picture. So you have this very interesting idea where I can actually spend time and probably put together information and analysis, which I can then pass on to my students. I have the time for it. Most of the people who listen to these things are either having fires to fight on their own in their jobs, or study for exams. So obviously, I give them the perspectives and jigsaw puzzle pieces and put that together for them. I get a lot of support from the industry. I get a lot of support from research teams of brokers and owners. And I also have decided very early, about a year ago, that I decided to do a certificate in geopolitical analysis from Florida Atlantic University, uh, jointly run by an advisory body called RAIN Advisory, which is pretty much American gold standard for geopolitics advising. Very interesting, and I would recommend it. But from Singapore, the time zone is pretty killing. It's 9 in the night till 5 in the morning, but it's a week well spent. Probably sleepless, but well spent. And finally, the biggest source of information for me is to keep myself updated with the industry is through my chat GPT. And it is not an AI model. It's my podcast that I do every month with Sea Trade Maritime. It's called My Chat about geopolitics and trade. My Chat GPT. You have the QR code. You can scan it. You can please tune in and listen. We've done 16 episodes so far. I've covered ship owners, cargo owners, research companies, finance companies, tech solutions. I'm looking at doing something with some P&I clubs now. I'm looking at doing something with JWC now. I've done one episode with BIMCO recently. So, and I want to do something with the lawyers as well. So obviously, it's a very interesting mix of people, as holistic a possible view as I can afford, right? Very interesting, and I'll share some insights from that in the next few presentations. Now, before we start off my presentation, I'm just going to ask very quickly Captain Gaurav to try and get a poll going on that. Which country do you feel will benefit from if the global manufacturing moves away from China? Everybody knows that China is the factory of the world. Which country do you think will benefit most? Will it be India? Will it be Vietnam? Will it be South Africa? Will it be USA? Of course, Mr. Trump wants it to be USA, but let's see what most of the people feel. I think more than 50% of you have answered. We can kind of keep it open for the next few seconds, give a chance to everybody to answer. So 75% of you have answered, and overwhelmingly you believe India is where it is going to be there. And maybe it's the bias comes from the audience and where you guys are based right now. So we'll end the poll. Most of you believe that it's India. 75% of you believe that. Interestingly, only 20% of you believe India, and very few talk about Africa and US. It's probably a part to do with the audience that we have, but it's also interesting that India is shining a lot more in the global geopolitical stage. Although I must say that I would say in reality, Vietnam might actually benefit. But the first question is, why is it that we are talking about China moving away? How crazy is the impact that China has got? So just imagine in 2000, this was what the world looked like. All the countries in the blue had the largest import of physical goods from US. And all the countries in red basically had China as the largest supplier of physical goods, not services, physical goods. And then China entered WTO and started ramping up this whole idea that we want to produce for the world. And they did that. In about 18 years, we just completely went into a space where the world became red. Now that's great for a Liverpool fan because red is great for Liverpool fans. But but what does it mean for the rest of the world? Um, you can see that basically, even right in the backyard of America, be it South American countries, be it Cuba, there's a lot of the aspects where China has gained. And if you take this to 2025, and this is a bit dated, but it's one of the best representation I know, which I can see. If you take it 2025, maybe a few European countries have become blue. But even today, China is dominating. Now, this is not just geopolitics, politics, and economics. It is trade. Because Brazil, which was blue till that point of time, is now red, which means that uh, goods that used to come from close by in US, pretty much without any major geopolitical upheavals around it, are now coming all the way from China, going through some major choke points like Malacca Straits, going through some major issues like piracies on East Africa. And those aspects are basically creating challenges. This is what really starts impacting your business and your daily space in shipping. So this shift from 2000 to 2018 doesn't necessarily only involve, you know, some Chinese interest in economics and BRI and everything else. That's important as well. But it actually impacts who's importing from where and what is the passage going to be through. And that is where geopolitics becomes front and center, right? So please keep this in mind, that this is how much the world has changed in a very short span of 2 decades. 2 decades is not a long time. It has taken hundreds of years for industrial revolution to actually penetrate through the rest of the world. For 20 years, China has managed to upheaval or change the games completely. So it's a very big topic. I don't have the time to go through everything that we can cover. We will go through very quickly impact points, and I will try and focus on maybe barriers to trade and tariffs a little bit more, to try and give you a flavor of what it is. It might take a little bit more than 45 minutes. Please bear with me. So obviously I needed, because I'm teaching this to students, I usually have to divide it into a structure, and I divide the geopolitics and shipping intersections into 6 impact points. The first impact point is barriers and free trade. How do barriers and free trade agreements impact uh, geopolitics and shipping? How do critical pathways, whether it's wars, whether it is climate change, whether it's piracy, how do they change the geopolitics and shipping space? How do demographics, changing income level, urbanization, how do that actually change the demand aspects, and how can governments and countries exert control on that? Remember, China had a one-child policy for many years. And obviously, that has completely changed the demographics. They're probably regretting that now because they want to have a greater amount of population, and they have a problem with regard to demographics. Economic dominance of a country, very much to do with the BRI, but there are other countries which dominate certain countries in certain parts of the world, and we'll talk very briefly about that. When alliances are formed, trade is front and center in that. So as new alliances are formed, whether a current alliance is being created or destroyed or expanded, that has a huge impact on trade. And then when geopolitics comes into a play, some new trades are created because certain countries exert the geopolitical power and might and change the way certain imports and exports are happening. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about technology's impact, and I'll share with you a very interesting case study that I did with a business school in India on technology's impact on shipping and geopolitics, how they interact with each other. Right. So that's the structure. So this is what everybody knows and talks about when it comes to geopolitics. The first thing that comes to your mind is Iran vows payback. Now, this is a very old newspaper, but it looks like it's yesterday's news, right? Literally, literally. And of course, you have Mr. Trump in every single newspaper in the world, all the things that you can think of: sensationalism, opinions, personalities. What is really important for you guys to understand is there is an unseen dimension of geopolitics which doesn't come out in the news as often. How do companies decide where to source their commodities from? How do people decide where to buy their commodities from and sell their commodities? Very important and very interesting to take that view. What route to take? Geopolitics determines a lot of that as well. Because if there's a critical pathway which is blocked, obviously you have a challenge. Like you can see what happened with the Red Sea and Houthis. Security concerns. You have got a lot of issues happening in Venezuela now. And lots of people are reconfirming, re-looking at what their trade routes are all about. Hubs are developed because of geopolitics. There is a push in India to try and see if we can create an alternate to the Singapore story or the Sri Lanka story by opening on the Andaman Nicobar. And this is all about creating hubs. And that's geopolitically very important. And of course, there are yesteryear memories. People always remember what has happened in past. We grow up with our experiences and we grow up with our events around us and we take decisions based on that. Every time a Japanese PM goes to a war shrine, there is a reaction from China. Yeah. So these are some of the things that people don't forget. And obviously, there has an impact. In the recent India-Pakistan conflict, you had Turkey supporting Pakistan. Already there's a reaction that Indian traders are saying we will not buy Turkish products. All these things will stay in people's psyche. They will. And that is something which will be geopolitically driven, and shipping will get impacted because of that. So I will just quickly go through the some of the impact points, not spend too much time on them. The first thing that we need to understand is how do trade and geopolitics interact with each other. So trade in general, and this is 101 economics here, happens because of three main reasons. One is pure economic reasons. Somebody is the cheapest producer, cheapest supplier, economic makes sense, comparative advantage, and you just go ahead and buy it from them, which is perfectly fine, which is exactly how most of the trade happens. But there is also a strategic reason for trade to happen. So one of the classic examples is Saudi Arabia. It has decided explicitly to try and diversify itself away from oil revenue as much as possible. So diversification is a strategy for it. So what has it done? It has basically gone ahead and started extracting and mining phosphates. Phosphates were basically more or less a preserve of the Jordanians, of the Moroccans. They were the ones who were supplying to Asia. Now, suddenly you have got Saudi coming into play and they want to basically diversify. That opens up a new trade route because the diversification is the reason. And their economics takes a backseat. They may not really think about it from a pure economic perspective. They may just think it from building markets. And finally, geopolitical reasons also creates new trade flows. So there is an example that I give to my students. There's a water heater maker called Vanward, which used to ship all their water heaters made in China to US. And after the first Trump tariff situation and all these retaliatory stuff, Vanward was pushed by the US buyers. You have to relocate to another place. Please do not buy, we cannot buy Chinese goods. We are under pressure from government and other bodies. Please go ahead and try and produce somewhere else. So they relocated part of their facilities in Australia. And now suddenly Australia, US is a new route for these water heater makers, water heaters that are coming out. That's where the complete change happens as well. So what companies need to do is to start identifying these trends. Where are these things going to go? And start asking these questions very early. Also look at historical trade relations and see who will never really do business with each other. So you know you can eliminate some of these people and then look at possibilities of where the trade might shift to and try and look at these strategies. You can get newspaper articles and start reading them and looking behind the headlines to understand what it is. I'm going to spend a bit of time on trade wars and sanctions. So there's a big difference between financial and non-financial barriers. Tariffs, penalties, duties, taxes, these are all financial barriers. What that means essentially is that parties have got to really negotiate the best possible deal that they can get, depending on their commercial position, depending on their bargaining skills and negotiating skills. But the trade might still happen because somebody will bear the cost if it actually still makes economic sense. They are not that big a deterrent for trade. On the other hand, the non-financial barriers, restrictions, quotas, barriers, bans, these are big challenges. So you must be able to distinguish between the two. which is why I still believe that Trump himself believes that as far as American consumers are concerned, they will try and keep importing goods at this point of time. If there is actually some kind of a reduction in import volumes, it's probably because there is a negotiation space going on right now. There's a lot of discussions happening between the buyers and sellers who's going to bear this. And then there is going to be an equilibrium reached at the end of the day. But financial barriers are not as detrimental because they are just about money at the end of the day. On the other hand, even if you have a restriction like the earths restriction that China imposed on exporting out to the to US, then it doesn't matter how much money you're paying, you will not get that stuff. So this is where the trade completely collapses and then a completely new trade opens up. So you have to be very careful in trying to analyze financial and non-financial barriers. So let's get to the elephant in the room, Trump. So Trump basically has got a clear understanding that he has won the elections. He has got a 4-year term now, but some of the things that have really worked and not worked for him need to be analyzed in a different lens from the previous term of Trump. This time around, he knows that the tariffs have not worked last time. Tariffs have actually ballooned and increased the deficit, trade deficit with China, and he has to work in a different way this time around. Secondly, he doesn't have any re-election. He basically is going ahead and trying to just get deals done and leave a legacy. He just wants to be remembered as a president who did things. What things? He doesn't really care at the end of the day. His team selection this time is very clear. Only loyalists. Marco Rubio is probably the exemption. But other than that, every single one of the persons who's actually on that team is there only because Trump has handpicked the person, and nobody else will pick up that guy except Trump because they're completely loyal to Trump as well. Also, Trump has got very little historical tie appreciation. So he's not worried about the NATO relationships, the relationship with other countries, what the USA has done in the past. He doesn't really care. He's very clear that he's going to try and push fossil fuels up on the radar as much as possible. Drill, baby, drill, dig, baby, dig. All that is going to happen all the time. He's very clear about it. He has been starting to remove a lot of these barriers for drilling. All the subsidies for electric cars are going away. He's very clear. Fossil fuels are basically going to be back in business in a big way. Now, everybody is going to lose a little with Trump because that's the way he operates. But I believe Europe will lose more than Asia, and I'll explain that to you in a minute. Now, this will affect trade in a big way. Normal countries, China, EU, Japan, India, all these countries actually impose tariffs to protect their domestic champions, domestic industry. That is why the impact of tariffs domestically is much higher. When you impose a tariff, the domestic industry gets a lot of benefits. The problem is the Americans don't have that kind of a domestic industry to work with. It'll take a long time for them to do that. So I don't think that it's about retaliation, but just leverage. Trump is basically trying to do this to force trade negotiations. He's not really looking to bring all these guys to start producing in US all the time. He just wants to basically get deals done as much as possible. But that will change supply chains. That will reshore industries in some ways, nearshore them. And obviously, economic alliances will come up. He's throwing more people towards China, South Africa being a good example. He has pissed off South Africa so much that they are doing more with EU, more with the other side in China as well. Now, it's an entire framework of global trade that he's trying to rewrite. So we have to wait and watch what all he actually rewrites. The UK deal is a precursor, but I don't think it's a great indicator of what the rest of the deals will look like. Another thing that he has to remember is that midterms are coming up in a year and a bit. He is very, very scared that he will lose the majority in either Senate or Congress. If he does that, his plan gets derailed or delayed quite a lot. So he is a person in a hurry because he has 2 years to get this thing out there. And that's why he's threatening people left, right, and center. But what is important is the data. What is important are the figures. You look at this, it's a very small graph. I'm sorry for that, but this is basically what it is. The first chart shows you countries' shares of total trade with US and China. The dark line is with US and the light blue is with China. Except for Canada, Mexico, and a EU, which also has a bit, nearly every other country in the world has much bigger trade with China than with US. Now, if you have a simple business proposition where you have a customer with whom you're doing $1 million of business and another customer who's you're doing only $100,000 of business, economically, it's very difficult for you to choose the $100,000 customer. You have so much linkage with China over a period of time. It's very difficult for you to delink from China. So I don't see that Trump's move to try and push China away from the rest of the world will work. In fact, it'll go the other way around. And that is why we have to really think where Asia and China figure in Trump's overall plan. Asia has one big advantage. It has the largest middle class in the world even today. But by 2030, 65% of global middle class will be from Asia Pacific. And only 14% will be from Europe, and then 13% from Americas. This is a big marketplace that Trump has to look for. And why does he have to look for the marketplace? Somebody was naively talking about the fact that they are drilling so much of shale oil, they can simply use that shale oil themselves. They don't need to ship out the shale oil. But the US refineries have actually been catering or being tuned, or their refining capacity is linked to a heavy crude oil. Shale is not that heavy crude oil. So shale, whatever is produced, has to go away to the rest of the world. They will have to keep importing crude. Where are they going to import that crude from? Mostly it was coming from Canada, but now Canadians have also not been very happy with the way Trump has been working with them. But the shale oil will move. And the shale oil has to move to those consumers where the demand is going to be the highest. And the demand is going to be in Asia. And Asia is prepared in a bigger way to manage Trump challenges because of the alliances that they've formed. ASEAN is a much better alliance that they work together. BRICS, expanded to BRICS Plus, has a much different bargaining power if they actually come together. Europe, on the other hand, does not have that kind of cohesiveness right now. It is going through a lot of political turmoil, whether it's Germany, France, Spain, all of these countries are having challenges. Italy is trying to find its own course with Trump. And those things will obviously have an impact on how Europe as a cohesive force tries to actually negotiate with Trump. Also, EU is committed to a lot of things that Trump is against: climate change, decarbonization. All these things are not really something that obviously Trump really wants to talk about. So if Asia becomes the marketplace for US goods or US oil and US energy, this is great news for shipping, because this is all long haul trade, which is actually going to come up. And this will basically be substituting some of the medium to short haul trades. And that is good news for shipping for sure. We talk about offshoring, nearshoring. I just wanted to quickly give you the snapshot of this. It's self-explanatory. Right now, the world is massively into the offshoring. You saw how red the world had become, mostly offshoring. So China is importing raw materials. China is exporting finished goods to the world. And that is great for both bulk carriers in case of raw materials and finished goods in case of container industry. If it comes closer to nearshoring, which is Mexico, for example, it's actually a little bit worse for the finished goods because the distance that they will travel to US will be less. And that is obviously one of the things which will be negative for containers. But it'll still be good for raw materials because bulk carrier demand might continue. Of course, there is a different aspect of the USTR proposals that we talk about as well. But if it's onshoring, it is the end of container business as we know it for sea, because most of the stuff will move within the country and will move by land. And that is where it might get very challenging for container business if reshoring and onshoring happens into US. But it's still good for bulk carriers going into US if the raw material demand continues to go up, but it may not be as good a bonanza as offshoring. So please understand that onshoring, nearshoring, and onshoring, if you look at it from a bulk carrier container demand, there are various aspects to look at, and there are very different implications for each of the industries going forward. Another thing that has happened with Trump is the Ukraine mineral deal. There are massive trade implications for that. They have got an agreement in place which covers 57 types of resources, including oil and gas. So they have a clause saying that if America decides to buy the resources that Ukraine has, America will be given the first choice to either buy it for themselves or basically designate the purchaser of their choice. That opens up trade flows all over the world. They can basically get it from Ukraine and sell it to any of their allies, any of their customers, any of the people that they want to do. This is a very different way of doing business than what the current Ukrainian model was. So America will control a lot of that trade. Now, my question is, a lot of people say that there's a lot of aspects where the war is still prolonging. Russia and Ukraine are still at hammer tongs with each other. Can the Americans get access to this resource? Will they be able to get this minerals out, if at all they can or cannot? I believe they can, and there is a precedent to this in past. In the first Gulf War, there was a very there was a very clear situation where the Kuwaiti tankers with oil were stuck in Kuwait, and Saddam Hussein was very clear: you bring the oil tankers out, I'm going to bomb the crap out of them. So what did America do? They needed the oil. They reflagged the tankers to US flag, and then they provided security cover and got the oil all the way to US. Basically, Operation Earnest Will can be easily repeated in Ukraine if it comes to that. So here is a great example of looking back in time and seeing what kind of examples, what kind of situations might have actually happened, and can this be repeated? Maybe, maybe not, but it's worth watching, worth keeping an eye on. So this is a quick understanding of the, I'll just go very quickly because we're running out of time, but this is according to me, the stages that Trump has basically got in his mind. Most people are not able to read Trump's mind, neither am I, but this is my assumption that this is what he's trying to do. He starts with reciprocal tariffs, shock and awe. His focus is on isolating China with higher tariffs. And he knows that the Americans have got very few alternatives to Chinese goods. Even with tariffs, they might be still cheaper than producing locally. Initially, the prices will shoot up because of tariffs, because American consumers will still have to consume the goods. Eventually, the consumption will go down because the demand will get destroyed as people start conserving cash. That is already happening. If you look at the customer sentiment and consumer sentiment in US, it has gone down tremendously in the last 2 months. Eventually, a recession is coming, and the prices will come down because of recession and not because of anything else. Federal Reserve will be pushed to reduce the interest rates because recession is what they will actually have to avoid. Inflation would not be there. And obviously, you can see Trump pushing Mr. Powell all the time. The commodity prices are going down. The oil prices with the Israel-Iran have got a little bit of an upswing, but they are still at a level which is way below than the $100 level which it had reached even without these wars being in place. Meanwhile, Trump will go and say that China is paying for the US debt through tariffs. In reality, consumers are paying for that tariff, but the US debt might be written down. He said in his press conference yesterday that we got $88 billion in 2 months' time, which I think is a far-fetched understanding. But at the end of the day, he will get money from tariffs. That is happening even today. And of course, he will proclaim victory, saying, I've got lower prices, I've got lower interest rates, I've got lower commodity prices, and China is paying off my debt and your debt. Now, please vote for me. And he might get a victory in the midterm elections. So this is what I believe he's planning to look at. And it sounds crazy, but probably logical. What we have seen so far from Trump is mostly non-economic reasons to impose tariffs. Previously, tariffs were imposed to protect domestic industry. He's looking at immigration, fentanyl, lots of things why he's putting tariffs. He also has got knee-jerk reactions. He's deciding to do things immediately. On a golf course, he decides to put tariffs in Colombia, something that will continue to happen every day and everywhere. He's got very high territorial ambitions with Greenland, Gaza, Panama. All this will be a continuous problem as well. The main focus for him is to drive fear to get a deal done. That's all he's worried about. He's blackmailing everybody into that. The challenge is, because of this attitude, America is now heading towards a similar route that Britain was at one point of time during the colonial time during World War II. A lot of countries were criticizing Britain, saying that You are championing the freedom of the race, human race, by fighting a world war against the axis of evil, but you're still having colonies. Why don't you try and at least finish that hypocrisy at the end of the day? And obviously, Britain became pressurized, and eventually, a lot of colonies became independent. The public perception of USA is changing to be a bully, to be a unreliable, non-trustworthy partner. It's also withdrawing from lots of projects. So obviously that's creating a lot of challenges with aid and other things. And China and India and other countries and EU is stepping into those aids. Aid creates trade. Aid is linked to trade in most of the cases because people normally get closer to relationships and then they do business together. The three areas where I think is going to be three stages is, in short term, money is pouring into US even now as people are basically trying to appease Trump if they can. In the medium term, the world will literally be split into two camps, already happening: pro Trump, anti Trump. The Hungarians, the Argentinians, even Italians are making the right noises pro Trump. On the other hand, other people are making anti Trump noises. In the long term, I actually believe that USA will become more isolated, and that can be a huge problem for the trade and geopolitical aspects as well. US is the largest importer in the world and the second largest exporter in the world. If USA starts getting more isolationist, people start bypassing America and their plans for future, this can have a huge impact on trade and shipping, right? Okay. Now, obviously, I will try and go through. I'm really way out of my time, but this is a big topic, so I just need to give you the perspective. Now, when it comes to critical pathways and changing trade flows, there are three aspects which I normally look at: piracy, wars or proxy wars, which is Russia, Ukraine, or now Israel, Iran, or the Houthis, and the climate change, which is the Arctic route. All of these things are creating huge challenges for that. I don't have the time to go through all of them, but I just want to give you one more critical pathways, which is the pipeline. The Canadians basically expanded their Trans Mountain pipeline just a few months ago, and they tripled the capacity of that to 890,000 barrels a day. This additional capacity of 600,000 barrels a day, they learned from Trump 1.0 that they can't depend on America and they don't want to depend on America. Now the worst fears have come true in Trump 2.0. Most of the time they were supplying to US. Now they're starting to divert a lot of this oil from the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion to Asia. Reuters had a news item saying 20% of the trade is now Asia-centric from the new pipeline, and more is being diverted to Asia. Now, an Aframax, which is the maximum size of a ship that can go to Vancouver to load crude, essentially has one problem. It was basically having a 15-day trip to US Midwest. Now, it has got a 75-day trip to China. That has exploded the trade completely and changed it because of pure geopolitics. 5 times supply shrinkage and a demand explosion because of the fact that the ship is going all the way to Asia and coming back. This is where it changes a lot. And this would not have happened had Trump 1.0 not given indications and Trump 2.0 given the problems that Canadians have seen now. They are diversifying, and that is creating a big change in trade flows as well. Demographics, my favorite topic. I really feel that demographics are something which is a small unseen area people don't understand. I will not go through the whole thing, but I will just take a quick poll at this stage to try and give you some perspectives. Captain Gaurav, can we have a poll? So among the large economies, which country do you feel has the most favorable ratio of working versus dependent population? That is known as demographic dividend of a country. When the working population is greater than the dependent population, it's basically where the value, the demographic dividend is the highest. Any surplus of that is good news for everybody. So where do you think the largest economies have the, whether it's America, China, Japan, or is it India? I think we've got about 50% of you answering. More are coming in very quickly. And it's very interesting that some of you say Japan and China, and most of you say India. I think we closed the poll because of time constraints. But basically, majority of you still believe in India, but a lot of people have voted Japan and China, and unfortunately, Japan and China have actually had a big problem, and their demographic dividend is not looking that good. Japanese demographic dividend ended in 2004. So now the working population is lower than the dependent population. The Chinese story will end in 2031. The Indian story will end in 2055. The dependency ratio is phenomenally good for India. And what does that mean? That means that the middle class, the demand, the economy, the income, all of that is positive, and it's going in the direction that more shipping will actually be directed towards that particular country. Now, there is a big difference between the past and the future and the present as well. In the past, let's say I got my salary on a small town in India on 1st of January. I would probably not be able to convert that into demand for goods immediately because my small town did not have a bank, they didn't have a mall, they didn't have any transport to get the goods across to me. So I would actually go and spend it when I go to a bigger city and then access those goods and resources. The income to demand shift or conversion takes a longer time in the past because you need to establish financial structures, marketplaces, transport infrastructure. Today, companies have to look at the fact that it's all happening instantly. The income is not coming in a bank account because there is no need for a bank. It's coming in your mobile wallet. The income is basically not being converted to demand because no malls are there, because there is no need for malls, because Amazon is there. Marketplaces are online. And finally, delivery is also being done by drones now. So at the end of the day, it's the technology, it's the ability to harness technology to really convert income into demand, and therefore demand will become ships. That is what companies have to watch out for. They have to look at demographics and they have to look at symbols and benchmarks or indicators like mobile phone uptake. In Nigeria in 2024, there was an 85% mobile penetration rate with 92% of adults owning a phone. And the country has 200 million mobile connections. These guys get their salary on their phone, spend it on the phone, get it delivered to them through drones. That's how quickly demand is changing. Companies need to keep up with those changes. That's just a simple example. Uh, Economic dominance, I just want to mention very quickly, it's all about BRI, and BRI has basically been a big project, the largest ever the world has seen. Obviously, it has a huge impact, but it's very similar to the way it works. China in 2019, this is an interesting fact. China in 2019 surpassed all the other countries in the world to have the maximum number of diplomatic posts abroad. It may be diplomatic posts, but they are not there just to do diplomacy. They are there to do trade. They are there to do business. They are there to protect Chinese interests and try and secure business for China and both ways up and down. At the same time, Africa is a classic example of how much China has penetrated the country and the market. Please understand, Ghana, Guinea, Ethiopia, Tanzania, these countries have got billions of dollars that they owe to China. That's why I tell my students and companies that if you want to buy Guinean bauxite, you can't go to Guinea because you will not get any understanding and any decisions there. You need to come to Singapore, meet Winning Shipping in Suntec City. They control all the aces in that trade of bauxite. This is where the big difference is, that China has created a two-way trade exactly the way the colonial trades worked. Raw materials into China, finished products back to those countries from where the raw materials came from. This is a trade pattern that you need to follow very closely. Every single investment that China is doing in a part of the world must be followed by a trade pattern that comes up, and you must follow the trade pattern to understand how businesses are happening. Other people are getting into the space now. America, India, Russia, all of them have been investing heavily in Africa as well. Follow the trade patterns very closely. Alliances which are redefining trade. Obviously, one of the biggest alliances is the BRICS alliance, which has just come about. But I just wanted to explain this from a new trade flow perspective, not an alliance, but a trade flow. In 2011, when I was in Clavenes, the Qataris called us up and said, listen, we want to do a shipment into US Gulf of urea. And we were like, but you have a contract with Yara. You have a marketing agreement with them. He said, we've just annulled that contract. We've just terminated that contract because Yara was basically having the marketing arrangement with multiple fertilizer plants globally. They always used to connect the closest origin to the closest destination, and they never took the risk on counterparty and payments defaults. So Qataris were only selling to Asian companies and Asian customers, while the lucrative US business was with the Norwegians and the European fertilizer plants. They ended that particular arrangement with Yara and started shipping on their own. A new trade route of urea from Qatar to US Gulf opened up, and we did multiple contracts with Muntajat and the Qataris on that route, purely because of geopolitics. Purely because of geopolitics. One more poll before we go to the next space. I know we've got more time, but please, this is a topic which is very interesting. Captain Gaurav, can I just request that poll? Which country do you feel will be the next one to join the BRICS alliance? Remember, the BRICS Plus alliance is now 10 countries. Will it be Indonesia, Argentina, Thailand, or Australia? So it's good that a lot of people know about the BRICS alliance. A lot of people know that these countries have actually been looking to join or wanting to join. So that's very good news. That's a lot of answers already. That's very good. And again, I think we have to close the poll at an early stage, but we get the gist of it. Most of you believe Indonesia. Can I just end the poll? Yep. And that means that most of you believe it's Indonesia. And I also believe Indonesia is right at the beginning of the queue to get into BRICS Plus as well. So BRICS went to BRICS Plus. I just wanted to highlight what it means. The original BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. BRICS Plus includes Ethiopia, Egypt, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates. That's a very, very interesting space. 3 Middle Eastern countries, 2 of them earlier enemies, but now are basically brothers, as they call each other, and 2 African countries for the first time into BRICS. Together, they control majority of the resources, the population. A substantial amount of natural resources sit with them. A huge marketplace sits with them. If they get it right, and if they ally with each other properly, this can be a huge, huge potential trade impact, and geopolitically, it can be a huge impact as well. So remember, India, China, Africa on the same table rarely happens, happening in the BRICS Plus. Russia and Iran together can start doing deals. Both of them don't want to use the US dollar. More barter deals are happening as we speak. All these things are going to have a huge impact on trade. All these slides are available to you. All these slides will be given out, and the recording will also be available. So please feel free to refer it to back again. I come to the last point with regard to the impact factors. That's technology and trade flows. Here, I just want to give a simple example. Technology is something which everybody talks about as a hidden sleath impact. But in reality, you have to look around you to see where things are changing. So I looked at technology, meat substitutes, and grain trades and their linkage with each other with IIM Udaipur when I was with this bulk 2022. I asked 4 MBA students to look at how meat substitutes are eroding the demand for meat and what is the main driver for this shift. And they came up with 7 factors. First of all, demographics. The younger population is most likely to switch to meat substitutes than the elder population or the older population. Interestingly, the older population is eating less food anyway. So the younger population are eating more. So that impact is even magnified going forward. Taste is being recreated by Beyond Meat or Nestle, Conagra, Cargill. All these guys have got meat substitutes. They are breaking the DNA of the meat down and recreating it with plant-based substitutes. So the taste is being replicated to more or less the same extent. That's what they say. Price is becoming better and better because economies of scale and more players are coming in. Younger generation wants to be more health conscious. It's more sustainable. The convenience of availability has become better. The Burger King in Singapore is selling Impossible Whopper. That is not something that was there 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Finally, China and other countries are worried about food security. Meat substitutes are a great way to kind of not worry about the grains, dependency on grains, and obviously they want to try and do more of that as well. Now, these factors have a huge impact on the grain trades. Now, this is the final poll for the questions now. If I can just take this poll, Captain Gaurav, which grain is widely used to feed the animals? Is it wheat? Is it corn? Is it soybean? Is it rice? Which is the most widely used grain? Right. I think again, I will end the poll. If I can just request you to end the poll now because of time paucity. Most of you believe it's corn, and unfortunately, it is not. As I will show you right in my next slide, 77% of soya in the world is traded to feed the animals. 77%. And 20% of wheat and 40% of coarse grains like corn is basically traded for animal feed. Now, just imagine if the meat substitute demand is eroding the demand for meat, there is a knock-on impact for grain trades. Yes or no? Yes, big time. And I asked Clarkson's research to give me figures for the entire time up till 2030 of grain trade patterns, global grain trades. And they basically have an ascending graph expected with the population going up, assuming no impact from meat substitutes. If there is a 5% impact of meat substitutes taking over 5% of the demand for meat, that has a 27 million ton displacement of grain trades, mostly soya, but also corn, also wheat. And of course, if it's a price and parity, experience parity comes in, then maybe a 10% impact, which is by 2030, we'll see a 54 million tons displacement of grain trades. If somebody basically believes that grain trade is the mainstay of their business, they need to start relooking at the trade patterns very closely and see how meat substitute demand is changing. Now, interestingly, the soya demand will not move completely away. Some of the soya will still be shipped to the places where meat substitutes are being made because soya is still a ingredient for producing meat substitutes. The problem is the quantity of meat substitutes do not use that much of soya as the animals need to be fed to create the same amount of quantity of meat substitutes. So 1 kilo of meat substitutes, 1 kilo of meat, the amount of grain used is very different. And that's something that people have to keep in mind. Now, I'm coming to the last part. I'm really appreciative of the fact that you've given me time because this is an important topic. I will come to the toolkit because I genuinely believe that can I give you a complete answer? Can I give you all the information that you need to really do your job about geopolitics and managing it? No, I can't. It's a very vast topic. But I'm very clear in my mind that in order to remove darkness, you need light. I don't have the ability to bring that light to remove darkness completely. But what I can definitely do is by giving you a toolkit, I can remove the fear of darkness in you because I can tell you that there is a light switch in the room and I can show you the light switch so that you can yourself switch on the light at the right time and never be afraid of the dark. That is what I do with my students. I don't give them fish to eat, but I teach them how to fish. That is most important in my mind. And that's what the toolkit does. It's got 5 aspects of it. First aspect is knowledge. You have to understand as much as you can about your business, about your customers. Second is analyzing the data that you already have or asking for the right data in order to analyze it. Third is technology. There is enough solutions, portals, products available to manage these risks and create better visibility. Contractual robustness, very important. And that includes training. Jeffrey is here with me. He will vouch for this idea that, we must have continuous training. Gaurav is here with C and beyond. Continuous lifelong learning is very important, whether it's Institute of Chartership Brokers, whether it's customized courses. Every time you need to understand What are these charter parties? What are these concepts? Learning is something which is very, very important. And finally, you have to take a calculated risk after these four things. There's no free lunch. There is always going to be risk. You just need to manage it. Now, what does knowledge mean for me? For me, knowledge means you need to know your customers. You need to start with your customers, understand what they're doing, how they will get impacted by this particular geopolitical challenge. What kind of product are you selling to your customers? What kind of products are you shipping for your customers? You also need to know the sub uses of those products. If you are shipping iron ore to them, please understand iron ore cannot be eaten by anybody. It has to be converted to steel. It has to be then converted from steel into some consumer products. You need to know the entire supply chain, the entire space of that product. You also need to know who are the major producers and consumers of the product that you're shipping so that you know who can be the alternate trade flows of origin and destinations. You also need to know any historical biases which are there. And you also need to know the current geopolitical risks existing in the trade. These are 5 things that you must understand when it comes to knowledge. And I had this amazing, amazing tool, which I used to tell my team in Clavenes, that to produce 1 ton of steel, you need 1.6 tons of iron ore and 0.8 tons of coking coal. China has announced a new steel plant with a capacity of 5 million tons. Figure out how much iron ore they need, how much coking coal they need, and figure out where are they going to buy that from, how much have they got on their own, where is this going to come from? If it's going to come from Mongolia, it's going to come from Australia, what's going to happen? This is where the entire thing is about asking the right questions. Asking the right questions will make you, will give you, get you the right answers at the end of the day, right? So that's knowledge part. Research is a very important part of this discussion. Please understand that research is something that creates new knowledge or using the existing knowledge in a new way to generate new concepts. But first, you have to search in order to do research. The word is research. It's a second stage. The first stage is search, then research. And the research query or the search query must come from the business, from the commercial people. They must talk to their customers and then ask the research guys, my customer is telling me this. Can you please guide me on this to manage this particular issue? And I'll give you an example in a minute about it. Data analytics, very important. I recently did an amazing article on port performance in India and how port performance in India has actually reduced the time in port for most ships over a period of time. And that's why the supply of the ships have actually increased. Because the same ship that used to take 25 days to perform a voyage is now taking 20 days. Ships are discharging 80,000 tons a day. They used to discharge at 15,000 tons a day. This is the kind of difference that's happening. In this case, this particular idea about Fukushima disaster, the nuclear share went down massively and it was supplemented by oil, gas, and coal. If you go back in time, you will be able to see every single shipment that happened for oil, gas, and coal into Japan during this time. If, for God forbid, another Fukushima happens, you can go back and analyze every single trade that happened and maybe go and create scenarios with the patterns for those trades recurring again with the new development. Analytics is very important. Digital tools, very important. I actually am an advisor. I must declare this. I'm an advisor and investor in this company called Tathya, and they are basically into geospatial technology, Indian-based startup. And really, they have now created a geo panel, which I'm so happy. You can click on a port or a steel plant. It will give you all the news, which are geopolitical news, and they will tell you what are the production, pricing, and other aspects which have been affected, and trade which has been affected by that particular news. Global Trade Exposure is a free aspect of McKinsey Global Institute. It's available free of cost. Flutter Labs is a startup based in UK. They've just launched a product called Orion. Go and have a look at it. There are lots of other products like Ambre, Windward. All of these guys are great. They are digital tools for managing your risks. Now, I want to really share this from a podcast episode with Jay Lauritsen, Danish company, handy size owners. A lot of you guys know. I asked William, who was the head of the research at the time, on a podcast, which is available on my podcast, how did you manage geopolitical risk using technology? And he gave me an example of COVID. He says COVID was a big geopolitical challenge for us. We had heard grapevine rumors that steel production is picking up in China again. We did not have any way of getting confirmation on that. Our traditional data sources of brokers, agents, ports, all were dead, all were locked down. I had nothing available from my side. Now, They needed information to take a position in this market. So what did they do? They went and thought out of the box, and they bought high frequency seismic data from National Earthquake Information Center in US. It maintains earthquake data for the whole world on a regular basis, on a high frequency basis. And then they mapped out every single access point to a steel plant in China using Google Maps and polygons. And they did that, and then they put the seismic data on top of those polygons. And the minute you had a laden truck or an empty truck, the seismic signatures were different. The laden truck was giving a different seismic signature, empty truck was giving a different seismic signature. They created a pattern of laden trucks seismic signatures and concluded that activity has picked up, and they went and bought paper and made $3.2 million. This is on a podcast, guys. So this is the kind of value that technology can bring you. There is no better example than Mr. Lauritsen and Jay Lauritsen, what they did. Hats off to them. Fantastic sharing on my podcast. Thank you so much. I thank them for their thing. Watertight contracts, very important. Also, please remember that a word must be said about the seafarers. Seafarers are the ones who are at the foreground of facing the challenges with geopolitics. Today, there are 158 ships stuck in the Persian Gulf. They are all facing the ire of Israel-Iran conflict. The seafarers are the ones who are executing your deals. They are the ones who are really facing the music most of the time. Please try to make sure that the clauses are updated. The war risk clauses, the piracy clause, the crew change clause, the force majeure clause, all these are contractual clauses that you must make sure that you are trying to make sure the seafarers are protected. If you have a really bad clause and the ship has no option but to go to a danger area, in spite of a danger being there, you are being unfair to those seafarers, and you are being unfair to all those people who are helping you execute that deal. So please understand the robustness of the contracts is very important. And again, training is important. I believe Gaurav, Sea and Beyond is having a commercial shipping course starting in July. Those courses and the ICS courses and all the other type of professional courses are very important to really go and keep yourself updated. Please do that. Please keep yourself updated all the time. Finally, you need to evaluate your risks and then create a short-term, medium-term, and long-term strategy. You have to do evaluation. You have to take risks at the end of the day. And I'll end with this last part, which I think is one of the most interesting slides that I've ever created. The Chinese language has basically got the word crisis as Wei Ji, and Wei means danger and Ji means an opportunity. So the Chinese knew from day one that in every crisis lies an opportunity. There's a danger, there's an opportunity. The key is minimize danger, maximize opportunity. And the dots are all in front of you. Just try and connect them. Think beyond the headlines and try and connect them to your bottom lines as much as possible. That's the end of it, guys. Thank you for your patience. And thank you very much for listening in. I hope this has been useful for you.
Wonderful, Puneet. Wonderful. Really. I mean, amazing. We're all just spellbound. And I saw when you started, we had about 62 participants. And of course, we had a few more coming in. I don't think anyone has left the room. So, really amazing, very insightful session. Thank you for that, Puneet. And another thing, I mean, one is sharing your inputs, and other is being able to speak for that long and with that much of
I think the
passion.
topic is interesting enough, so it keeps me glued to what I speak, and a lot of it is relatable to the business that I'm in, so that makes it interesting. I have done 4-hour sessions in universities with a break in between, but it has been very interesting. Of course, when you do face-to-face sessions, there's more organic interaction. I see a lot of questions coming in from the audience, and I'm sure that we can maybe get an interaction going with some of them as well. I see Jeffrey nodding, so that's good news for me because he probably feels that it's something that is relevant to what we are trying to achieve. But at the end of the day, as I said, Gaurav, it's all about imparting learning and getting experiences, and broadening your own horizons, right? Every single student of mine basically comes back and writes one comment in feedback to me saying, I don't read the newspaper the same way I did before I did your course. That is the most satisfying comment I can get from anybody. So hopefully all the people in the audience today can actually come back and tell me that they are now reading the newspapers in a different way. Job is done, more or less. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now,
Yeah.
great. And we've got a few questions, and if you allow, you can probably take a few of the
Sure.
questions here. Um, let's take first this question from Gaurav Jain. And he's saying, if you have any insights on the following, there's a proposed Kra Canal in Thailand, is a project that would create a new waterway connecting the Gulf of Thailand and Russian expansion near Black Sea and Caspian Sea. Will above to really
So,
happen or only?
so thanks, Gaurav, for that question. I think the Kra Canal has been on the cards for a while. Um, it's a multimodal logistic project. So even though it may be a canal, it still will involve road haulage as well. And obviously, it will involve mostly um, uh, shortening the time that is needed to transit. So maybe the Malacca Straits might lose out some traffic, especially Malaysia might lose out some traffic. But I get a lot of requests from Singapore to speak about the Kra Canal and what is actually going to be the impact on Singapore. I genuinely believe that Singapore is a bit more unique as a place because it has multiple touch points available for ships. If Kra Canal can replicate those multiple touch points, then it may take away some traffic from Singapore. But Singapore offers you a one-stop shop for crew change, bunkering, other husbandry aspects, maybe some other aspects that you need to also link up. Maybe you have got offices of your company in Singapore that you want to try and get some people to come on board. These mean things are all small things, and but they make a big difference in terms of how the touch points of Singapore, the stickability of Singapore is there. Kra Canal is an expensive project. It will require a lot of commitment in terms of volume. And I think unless and until it becomes a feasible, financially feasible reality, it might be a challenge. And if a shipping company decides to invest in it, it can be that the container companies have earned billions of dollars. They might decide to look at, because exactly that's what happened with Maersk. They actually went and picked up Tanjung Pelapas because they thought Singapore was kind of too much for them, and they wanted to pick up a port on the other side. It has not really eroded Singapore's advantage in any way. So it all depends on how the investment scenario works out. I'll be honest, I've not looked at the Russian expansion that closely, but I will definitely have a look and maybe come back to Gaurav separately. I just wanted to mention also that I'm very active on LinkedIn. I do comment on lots of news items and other things, and my analysis are on LinkedIn as well. So all of you are free to connect with me and contact me if you are on LinkedIn. But my details are also given on the last slide. So please do connect with me in other modes as well. So that's obviously about that. Yeah, sure.
Thanks, Puneet. Um, this question from Sunil, and I think it'll be good for everyone to just to understand that how geopolitics will impact the freight for different trade routes worldwide.
So I think it's going to be a mixed impact. As I kept saying that, if America does send out more fossil fuels to Asia, that can have a huge impact on the positivity aspects of the business. But if there's nearshoring, reshoring, that can have a negative impact on the container freight as well. So all these factors that I've covered, look at it from this lens. If you read a headline, for example, on a tariff, then that goes into your barriers to trade impact factor. If you read something about population changes or urbanization, that goes into the demographics impact factor. So try and look at the impact factors, those 6 impact factors that I've given, and try and see which factor actually has relevance, and use that benchmark to try and create those questions that you need to ask. It's very difficult to put a simple answer to this, but I think it's going to be a mixed impact. One thing I must say is that watch out for Africa, because most of the countries have had to go through physical infrastructure development in order to reach a growth stage. But Africa is leapfrogging multiple stages of growth because of one reason, because technology is now allowing them to do that. Even Asia, when it grew, India, when it grew, it had to do a hard work of building infrastructure in multiple places. Africa has got pockets where things have actually gone 4 stages in one shot because technology has allowed them to do that. So watch out for Africa and watch out for the impact that it's going to have on freight rates going forward. So I think obviously Mr. Trump and US has made a choice of doing less business in Africa. Others have started taking up that share, especially the US aid being dismantled. South Africa used to get $1 billion for HIV testing. EU is now funding that $1 billion in aid to South Africa. And that means trade is moving more in that direction. So it's very difficult to predict how it will impact freight, but it will definitely have an impact. You just have to keep looking, and please keep asking your customers. Don't trust anybody, because your business is about your business and your business is with your customers. If your customers get impacted, you should be the first person to know and then start analyzing from there how the freight will get impacted. That's all my suggestion is. Yeah.
Right. And while you were on Africa and and Africa and China, and so one question from Kirat is, what the East India Company did to the world, you think the China is doing that to the world?
No, I don't think, because please remember the colonies were at a time where it was difficult to get information on a regular basis. Today, if anything is happening, it comes in news very quickly. It has huge implications. So I don't think that you can actually colonize countries in that easily. But what is happening is the economic interests are so closely tied. And I will just mention something very interesting. If you look at Africa, it is the only continent in which the countries are divided with straight lines. Straight lines. The boundaries are straight lines. That's how the colonial powers basically divided the country without giving any weightage to demographics and the communities or people there. They just said, this is my portion, Britain. This is your portion, France. This is Portugal. This is Spain. And they just divided it using straight lines. That is where China has been very clear and clever, that they have not decided to go politically into them, but they've decided to merge them economically and make them, let's say, dependent on them. And if they do end up with an economic problem like the Sri Lankans with Hambantota or Pakistan's with Gwadar, they are basically taking over assets in lieu of debt that they can't be paid back. Then they're taking over assets. That is a very different way than the way the colonies were being done. But the trade flows are the same. Raw materials into China, finished products back to the same countries. But other than that, they are very different because they're pure economic linkages rather than political linkages. Yeah.
An interesting question from Keegan, and that's essentially because the renewable energy is coming up. Do you feel, and the tankers are probably 13, 15 years of age, do you feel companies, ship owners will place more orders for the tankers because of the renewable energy, because of the demand may come down of the oil, or it's just the same for the next few years?
You're talking about the new buildings which are being built, right?
Yeah, especially for tankers. And
Sure.
the assumption is that renewable energy is gonna, the demand for oil may probably reduce if that
Right.
happens. Yeah.
So I actually believe that if the dual fuel ships are coming in there, a lot of the dual fuel ships today are using normal fuel oil and not using the renewable or the alternate fuels, even though they are duly fitted, because the availability is a big challenge and other things are a big issue. So I don't think people going into pure renewable energy ships, a lot of them are dual fuel ships. The other thing that I must tell you is that not just for tankers, please understand, the current fuel that the shipping industry consumes is the fuel that nobody wants. It is the worst of the worst refined space. This is the coal tar. Basically, nobody can use that. We are the first in the queue for that fuel. If you go to methanol, you go to ammonia, you go to hydrogen, there are other industries that already have supply chains and uses for that fuel. We are not the first in the line. We are way below other people in the line, whether it's aviation, whether it is urea, whether it is petrochemical. All these guys already start using these alternate fuels. So honestly, I feel the alternate fuel horizon can only shift if there is a huge carbon tax coming in and the price of fossil fuels becomes prohibitively expensive. Other than that, I still believe that the fossil fuels might continue with other additional measures to reduce emissions, including reducing speed. I just don't think that we are able to afford these fuels, displacing the current users of those fuels in industries which are already using them. We are way behind the queue at this point of time. But with other fuels, the traditional fuels, the one that we're using right now, we are on the top of the queue. Nobody else wants to touch it. So that aspect, I really don't see owners to overall change to renewables completely. They will go in phased manner, and they will go if the economics permit it, and not the other way around. Yeah. I'll take up Arvind's question with regard to why Vietnam is going to gain more from India. I think the reason why is because of two reasons. First of all, Vietnam has got a comparatively cheaper labor cost at this point of time. Secondly, it has literally become an extension of China in some ways. India has been resisting to allow China to come and invest in India for obvious reasons because it wants to be on its own. Vietnam has got less hindrances for Chinese to basically go and base it because of the proximity of China to Vietnam, and become the second base for production in order to then export, which is why the tariff discussion with US and Vietnam is going to be interesting, because China sees Vietnam as the extension of China, especially in some of the commodities where products that it is actually looking to export outside the ASEAN countries as well. So I believe the ASEAN advantage is also going to be there. But interestingly, China's investment will drive Vietnam's growth as a big manufacturing hub. And China is slowly looking to divest more of its manufacturing capacity outside China, and its choice mostly seems to be Vietnam and also Malaysia. India is not featuring in that list at this point of time, although we have just learned about resumption of direct air travel between India and China, which is good news that things are thawing a little bit, but it's still a long way. And Vietnam is catching very quickly. The fact that it's a communist country ideologically also helps some ways, but I think both these countries, China and Vietnam, are communist only in name. In reality, they are more capitalist than most of the other countries in the world. And I can make those kind of comments because I don't have a company to work with. So it's very interesting. But yeah, that is my understanding of why it is like that. But we can take up that discussion separately, Arvind, for sure. And we'll do that. Thank you, Praveen, for your comments, and Mr. Rajan as well. As I said, then Captain Mansoor is saying, is offshore industry expected to boom in near future? I would not have a specific view on that, but I still believe that the oil prices are being restrained. Also, remember one thing: the entire relationship between US and Saudi Arabia has turned on its head, because today America is not a consumer alone of Saudi crude, it's also a competitor of Saudi crude. US is one of the largest producers of oil, and it is exporting oil to the same markets where the Saudis are exporting. So suddenly, from a customer only to become a customer and a consumer, relationship changes, which is why if the oil prices are going up, the Americans are actually pumping more shale oil. I genuinely believe that the Iran-Israel crisis will spur more shale oil production, which had dipped last month for the first time. But more importantly, Canada stands to benefit from this, because Canada is one of the few countries, Venezuela is one of the few countries, which actually has a geopolitically free trade route to US. And US will need the crude from a simple perspective. Red Sea is locked up. Straits of Hormuz is locked up. Where do you think it's going to get its crude from? This is where Canada has to play its cards right on the geopolitical side. But yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great idea. Ahmed is asking about something about publications, magazine. Um, I don't know. I can only say just read the newspapers, and I read the Financial Times a lot. I read Foreign Affairs, a magazine which is available. I read McKinsey is a great resource to follow. They analyze a lot. There's a guy called Zaid Haider, who's a partner for geopolitics in McKinsey. follow him on LinkedIn. I learned a lot from LinkedIn. And talk to people. Keep asking questions. Remain curious. That will really take you further in your quest for knowledge, for sure. And thank you, Ankush, for the comments. And Jeffrey's already mentioned daily, freely, weekly newsletters. He's already mentioned a few. You can please do that. I just answered Ryan's question, how they are skipping infrastructure development stages. Please see, there is no need for bank, there's no need for mall, there's no need for delivery roads. It's all coming very quickly in one shot, from money in the pocket to goods on the ship. That's where technology is creating a huge advantage. And yes, it's related to ship husbandry, it's related to port construction. The companies and the countries have to start looking very quickly at production and growth, much faster than they used to. They don't have that much of leeway now. They don't have the time to sit and think. Things are happening very quickly. They need to move with times very, very quickly. That includes ship husbandry and port construction. And happy to share more if you need as well. Thank you very much for all your comments. I think we've more or less done the questions, Captain Gaurav. It is really, really good. When I met you in Bombay and we spoke about this, I was really, really happy that you reached out to me and looked at this. It's a great effort and a great initiative. I wish you all the best, and I wish all the people all the best. I'm sure we will cross paths in future as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Puneet, and I'm sure all of us are going much more interested in our knowledge, just from the talk which you have had. But more importantly, as you said, the way we'll now probably read a particular news, what we'll read, and also when you mentioned, talk to people and try and understand more from it, right? And that's essentially, I started doing that a lot once I met you, and kudos to you. So it's my pleasure and to have your session on our platform. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mas. It's a pleasure for me, and absolutely brilliant to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. No, great, great. Just one final poll. It's on the feedback, and I just, in case anyone of you would like us to do C and Beyond, also to have any other kind of sessions, or do something else in way of promoting a session or conducting the session, please do write it, or reach out to me as well. So that'll be it'll help us to improve as well. So look forward to your feedback, please.
Thank you so much. Very happy to see the feedback. And thanks so much. As I said, I'm always available. People have reached out to me, and I'm sure I'll also benefit from any insights that you guys have to offer. We all have unique experiences, and we must share them as much as possible. So this is a great effort to do that. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Bye. And stop the recording as well.